You after Reverend Bev. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Great seeing you all, and thank you for coming. My name is Michael Louis, and I'm chairman of the Independent Candidates Association. And I really think it's really outstanding to be in this Grote Kerk. We wanted to stand at the steps of Parliament, but I think God was on our side, because otherwise we would have been rained out in any case. But thank you to all of you for coming. This is a press conference on regarding the Electoral Amendment Bill. And may I take the opportunity in thanking all the press that are attending. And also, the great thing about this venue is we on live stream. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because sometimes the press prefer being in the comforts of their offices, which we also welcome, and it's just great to be here. But more importantly, we've got all the society, or a lot of the society organizations represented today. And colleagues, allow me to say that this is not about any one organization. More and more on this journey of more than 5 years, I've realized that it's all about the people and civil society and standing together. And that's why I'm just so grateful for the support and the courage of the voice of civil society. I don't know as countries what we would have done without civil society. I honestly don't know it. And may we all, on behalf of the people, thank all the civil societies for standing in the gap for such an important issue that we're all doing. What I was asked to do is just to more or less give you a background of where we're at, as many, many people don't actually understand this electoral reform journey, and it's been quite a roller coaster. So I thought I'm just going to give you a 5-minute rundown of the playing field and the facts of how it looks like. And then, because it wasn't the right thing for us to come on behalf of civil society and make one statement and everybody endorses it, we thought it will give it much more character that the leaders of these great organizations actually voice their concerns and their status on this bill themselves. I think it's much more authentic, much more powerful, and great. So hold tight. It's going to be just an hour. So, but I really think you're going to enjoy the contributions from all the leaders. So firstly, today we meet in the final leg of a legal challenge that started in 2017 to call for the end to a dominant political party structure of government. Many, many people and organizations constituted the revolutionary forces over many decades to fight for freedom. There have been many ideological outlooks and a rich variety of viewpoints, but the golden thread that united all is encapsulated in the words Amandla Nowethu, power to the people, the right to elect a government of choice. Do you agree, by the way? Thank goodness. The journey continued with the culmination of many statutory commissions, such as the Van Slaubert Panel Report in 2003, the Kgalema Motlanthe High-Level Panel Report, and even recently the Zondo Commission, calling for the vesting of a new electoral system that will delegate the right of voters to directly nominate their leaders and make them more accountable. Unfortunately, government did not listen and did not take heed and did not have the will to change. And it was because of the actions of members of civil society that had to go to the highest court in the land to force government to legislate the new Electoral Act. On the 11th of June 2020, the Constitutional Court issued a favorable judgment, and the Electoral Act was ruled unconstitutional, and Parliament was given 2 years to remedy. Unfortunately, Parliament has since inception viewed this issue as an administrative issue and not a constitutional human rights issue. The Minister of Home Affairs decided not to follow the advice of his Ministerial Advisory Committee and the majority report therein, and decided rather to follow a minor cosmetic changes to this bill. 2.5 years later have followed, of public submissions from civil society warning Parliament that the chosen system can and never will pass constitutional muster and does not pass the test of one seat, one vote of equal value. The opinion was supported by many senior council opinions and legal experts. The strongest of all these voices that voiced their opposition against this decision was the chairman of the Ministers' Advisory Committee himself, Mr. Vali Musa. And I quote what Vali Musa said. Vali Musa said, "The system proposed in the new electoral system is not backed by any form of literature analysis and does not exist anywhere in the world. In our committee, not a single party, which was the majority party included, academic, submitted or published an analytical paper explaining the wisdom of the proposed electoral system. The result of this new bill is an irrational piece of legislation and a disaster in waiting," unquote. It is with sadness and disappointment that as civil society we again have to gather here today to voice our rejection of this current bill that was passed by Parliament a few weeks ago, where the process in Parliament is characterized by a lack of responsiveness, not caring about public opinion, and lack of parliamentarians' accountability. Never before, colleagues, in my 28 years on the political landscape, has my experience also been that 2 presidents and so many civil organizations, 77 organizations today, and many of them represented here today, have voiced and criticized the substance of this bill, both in substance and in process. But then even worse, 2 weeks ago, I was definitely shocked. Thabo Mbeki at the Strategic Dialogue Group said he was present at an ANC executive meeting. And at this meeting, a member of the NEC suggested that the party will change the design of the electoral system to ensure that the ANC wins the election. And he went on to say that most of the NEC members even have no idea of the bill and its effects. A total tragedy. Former President Kgalema Motlanthe said, and I quote just this weekend, he said, "Either parliamentarians did not give themselves sufficient time, or they were just not inclined to have constituencies and have themselves run for election in constituencies and be accountable to the people. This bill is open for challenge and may not be certified by the Constitutional Court." So I don't know about you, but when 2 presidents, ex-presidents of this country, and the chairman that advises the president, the Minister of Home Affairs, says this bill cannot and will not pass constitutional muster, what do we do? Because they're going on regardless. Today is the last day for submissions to the National Council of Provinces. There's exactly 30 days, but 22 days if we count it just of working days, till the 10th of December, when the President must sign. Now, let me just give you a program of how this is going to look like, especially for the press and all those that are wanting to look. Today is the 9th. It's going to take 7 days for the Parliament, the NCOP to look at all the submissions that there are that have been submitted. That will take us to the 18th of November. Then they plan to have a debate at the NCOP on the 25th of November. The sad thing is, even if the NCOP just chooses to renumber the bill or just change one paragraph, it has to go back to the Assembly and it has to go back to the Standing Committee. That means on the 28th of November, this bill will go back to the Standing Committee and is expected then to be represented at the Assembly to be debated on the 1st of December. Now, we all know that the President has been given till the 10th of December to sign off the bill. Now, what is interesting, I went and looked at the average days that the President has considered bills in the past, and taking the bills from 2014 to 2019. And on average, the bills that have gone to the President to consider has been 42 working days. Now, you must know we've got 15 working days left. On average, it's 42 days for him to consider. How is the President going to consider one of the most profound pieces of legislation that will change the destiny of this country at most 5 days? Civil society cannot accept this, and we have to then consider and be encouraged to petition the President not to sign this bill. Our experience is, in looking at history in the world, that electoral systems do change, but it's not without mass uprising and the voices of civil society. Please, colleagues, we must not and cannot give up. I believe that we need to push through and should not accept any form of interim legislation to renegotiate post-24. And why do I say that? That I was there in 1997, and we had to compromise on a transitional arrangement just to pass the bill. And it's taken up to 27 years for this bill and electoral system to be re-looked at. It must not and cannot happen again. The bill before the NCOP is seriously defective. It is shameful, cynical of the Constitutional Court order, and insults the electorate. Hence the meeting today for our spiritual leaders, leaders of civil organizations, business and political leaders to make their voices heard. It's all about ordinary people to step out in faith and to leave a generational legacy for our children's children. So, colleagues, I'm going to invite a number of the leaders then to voice their concerns and their belief. And the first one is Prince Aubrey. I've traveled with him since 2017, and he's one of the leaders of the Khoi-San people. And they've really been outstanding in their plight because they're wanting to stand as independent candidates, and they never had the power and authority, and there was no political party that catered for them. And hence they started and encouraged us to fight for them. So Prince Aubrey will be the first speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Louis, for giving us, the Khoi and San peoples, an opportunity on this platform to voice our opinion. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Prince Aubrey Hector. I am the national spokesperson of the Ibiqua San Kingdom. I'm also co-convener of the 5 mainstream groupings of the Khoi and San peoples in South Africa, constituted from the Nama, the Korana, the Griqua, the Cape Khoi, and the San people. So in that regard, all protocol observed. Like Dr. Michael Louis observed in his introduction, yes, the Khoi and San nation as a whole, represented by the elders, ascended to the High Court when the matter was first presented by our most competent legal team. And we followed it through to the Constitutional Court level, where we were part of the great win in 2020. We rejoiced, but we realized the fundamental task that has now been placed in front of Parliament to now rectify this unconstitutional Electoral Act. Now, be that as it may be, we as the Khoi and San people, so to speak, the Bushman people, were sitting on the apex court as witnesses. And we were not just sitting there listening to the reasoning of the presentation of the senior counsels, of their facts, but we were also there, prior to that, listening to the merits prior for the Constitutional Court judges as a full bench to accept this case. We then listened and we found most profound statements that were made by both legal teams that, like the doctor alluded, since 27 years ago, the Electoral Act slid through unconstitutionally, somehow. And the judges, by that time, only debating the merits with the councils, asked them whether they are ready, both of them, applicant and respondent, if this full bench bring out a judgment, whether for or against the unconstitutionality of the act. And they accept whatever verdict might come. So the Constitutional Court judges went forward. We as witnesses in the benches witness how this all played out. In the end, the full bench of the Constitutional Court, the apex court of the Republic of South Africa, came out with a ruling that the Electoral Act is unconstitutional based on the clauses that were presented by the legal counsel. Then we went back, we rejoiced and we went back. But we came to the conclusion, cold and shivering, that what the court has just did as the apex court of the country, they just informed us publicly that every parliament constituted since 1994 was unconstitutional. Hence, it has far-reaching effects to bring this out to the public platform as such. And that was a word of caution to the Parliamentary Council, so that they can go back and really take the time to amend the Electoral Act to conform to the ruling. 2 years went past, they never conformed. In fact, they went back to ask for a postponement because they didn't have enough time, according to what we read in the media. And the Constitutional Court were once again very, very merciful to them and grant them an extension of a further 6 months. It seems now that they now conformed within that 6 months, but through the word of our legal counsel, we've now been informed, as being the foundation nation of South Africa, stepping up to this unconstitutionality, that the Electoral Act has been amended, but it was in a tit-for-tat situation. And even though they did some minor adjustments, according to them legally, the bill as it stands now will not pass constitutional muster. Therefore, we as the Khoi-San, the host of all nations in Africa and in the world, and in South Africa, we are appealing to the civil organizations and movements and society as a whole to come in objecting this bill that is still currently unconstitutional. And we are looking forward to draw Parliament closer to us as civil society, to talk to us, to the side, so that we can come to some sort of a conclusion to what we need to put forth to the broader public for the upcoming elections in 2024. Thank you very much for the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you much.
So the Archbishop of the Anglican Church unfortunately put in his apology, but he thought it must be represented by the youth. So I'm very glad that Abigail is going to read a message from the Archbishop.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Reverend Abigail Hopley, and I'll read a script or our views from the Anglican Church as read by Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. The Freedom Charter very clearly states that the people shall govern, and every man and every woman should have the right to vote and to stand as a candidate for all the bodies which makes the laws. We've been monitoring the electoral reform journey closely for the past 2 years, with the hope and the vision that the government would use the Constitutional Court judgment to usher a new electoral system, new leaders, and a new breed of South Africans that love and are committed to our country. Unfortunately, since the Constitutional Court ruled on the 11th of June that the Electoral Act is unconstitutional, we believe that the Minister of Home Affairs has been short-sighted to take the limited route and follow the minority report as recommended by the Ministerial Advisory Report. We believe again that by taking shortcuts, not following recommendations, procedures, and not applying your mind properly, you will keep on covering up things to justify yourself. The process will eventually catch up with you, and it has. We hereby clearly state that we do not, and I repeat, we do not endorse the current electoral amendment bill passed by Parliament, as we do not believe that it does fulfill the principle of the one man, one vote of equal value. Government, we believe, is playing a very dangerous game by tampering with one of the most basic human rights, the right to vote. Our country and people deserve better, and we are heading for a disaster if the voices and concerns of civil society are not taken seriously. These are the voices that will give the system a credibility. Our plea is for the National Council of Provinces to do all in its mandated authority to remedy the constitutional flaws in the bill so that we can have an electoral act that can truly enhance the much needed accountability we desire for our public servants and to give back the power to the people where it belongs. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Berry Burr. I am the chairperson of Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. Thank you. All protocols observed as I greet all my colleagues and all those of you who are gathered here today. So the values of our country are expressed in our Constitution. The voices of the faiths are indeed the voices of the people, and the moral imperative of faith leaders is to ensure that the voices of the people are heard. Cape Town Interfaith Initiative is an organization which brings together people of diverse faiths and belief systems with a view to understanding each other, creating interfaith harmony and understanding, and our common purpose is justice for all, inclusivity, and a world of compassion. South Africa is a multi-faith, multicultural country, and while we may not all agree with one another, it is imperative that we guard each other's voice and right to expression within the spiritual laws that govern all of us, the golden rule being do unto others as you would have done unto you, and the Charter for Compassion, which is the experiential guideline to the lived expression of that golden rule. Honoring the dignity of difference in our rainbow nation does not mean dividing us, but rather it means embracing us, embracing a system that protects the rights of all citizens to vote, and to vote independently if that is what they wish to do. We understand the deep need in our country for electoral reform to a system that enshrines political accountability and at the same time protects the right of the citizens to express their views. A country in which its citizens' expression is stifled is a country in danger, and a country potentially without hope. It is in view of keeping this hope alive for our democracy that we stand in solidarity with the voice of citizens today in saying no to the proposed amendments and the proposed draft electoral amendment bill. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lionel Lowe, the chairperson of the South African Council of Churches in the Western Cape. Michael has already said so much of what I wanted to say, but I would want to remind all of us that an opportunity was created in 2003 with the Van Zyl-Slabbert report to make the shift into a different electoral system. We understand that the proportional electoral system served a useful purpose to facilitate reconciliation at the time when we democratized. But it was clearly understood that it had to be temporary, and there was the opportunity to actually make the shift. And so today, the Council of Churches in the Western Cape join with the other organizations in saying that we cannot allow this opportunity to slip through. We need to go back to the Constitutional Court to say that what was expected has not happened, and the Constitutional Court will have to help us to remedy the situation. Because clearly, if the court does not intervene, if it is left up to the politicians, the change that we need, that we must have, that will accord the right to people to exercise their right to be candidates, will not be honored. And so we support a notion that we should go back to the Constitutional Court, irrespective of what happens, because we now clearly understand that even the NCOP is not going to be able to do what has to be done because the political will lacks. And then I want to just touch on one or two other things. The political parties are being advantaged by the bill as it stands presently, and we have to reject that. We support the principle of political accountability, which is fundamental to the shift that we want to see. That politicians have to be held accountable, because we now suffer from the consequences of that lack of accountability that has been prevalent by virtue of political party bosses wielding the power. The other thing that I want to say is we have to remind politicians the fact that they are in positions of power and authority. We expect them to exercise servant leadership. And that is fundamental to who we are based on our faith, that we expect our leaders to exercise servant leadership. If not, then we should be put into a position where we can remove them if they don't do that. And so we do not support the notion that even though some hope is being pinned on the NCOP to remedy the situation, we don't expect that it will be remedied. Thank you.
Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum to everyone. My name is Sheikh Ihsan Talib. I'm here on behalf of the Muslim Judicial Council. I wish to perhaps just pick up where Reverend Lionel Lowe mentioned about our, I think, aspirations of what and expectations of what could happen at the NCOP today and in the following weeks. I think we are quite clear that nothing will happen. And so the fight is a long fight to the Constitutional Court. I don't think there is a question about that. Having listened to the experts, especially on in this particular leg of this civil society campaign over the last few weeks. And so on the 10th of December, when the President is supposed to sign this law into legislation, we are obviously all required to still be present and in attendance. We have this morning been in front of Parliament trying to represent civil society about this attendance and this presence. We were about just under 10 people there or so, I think. And so whilst we take courage and encouragement from the fact that there were some of us there, whilst we take encouragement from the fact that civil society is represented by many of the wonderful organizations seated in front of us here today, whose banners are also on display here today. But it would seem that that is not enough. I think what we need here today is to make a clarion call to South African civil society, and in particular South African grassroots civil society. I think our call here today is one about the whole idea of electoral reform being about accountability of elected officials to the electorate. And if it is, like we understand, that our current system of laws is unconstitutional, then I think we are in big trouble as a country. And it is probably for that reason why we find that the corruption and the level of extent of analysis that we find of sliding into a failed state is as alarming as we find it today. And so unless democracy is about accountability. Without accountability, there is no democracy. Democracy is also about numbers. And the people in power, regrettably, look at nothing else except numbers. And so there is a need for us to have civil society become understanding of that imperative of being vigilant, especially in the light of the current prevailing circumstances of rampant corruption. And so the vast majority for us as, I think, faith leaders of this country, we wish to recognize that we are a community, we are a country who believe in God. The vast majority of South African citizens believe in God. And belief in God is about belief in justice. And so if we, for example, take that very famous saying of one of the leaders of South Africa who recently passed, Bishop Tutu, who said that if there is silence and apathy in the face of tyranny and corruption, then you have chosen tyranny and corruption. And so that, I think, is the indictment as well as the challenge to civil society here today. Because given the rampant spread of corruption, civil society is literally and is physically the last line of defense for this democracy. And notwithstanding all the good work that is being done, if grassroots mobilization is not again going to take place, then one shudders to think about what happens when KwaZulu-Natal, about a year and odd months ago, spreads throughout the country. One shudders to think what will happen when anarchy and lawlessness becomes more of a phenomenon as a result of the corruption. And that is because of the fact that the people are starving. That is because of the fact that we are the most unequal society in the world. And that is because of the fact that those who are feeding at the trough have no consideration for civil society and the suffering of the poor and the vulnerable. And so therefore, elections in the current form, given the current legislation that we have, elections simply become an instrument in the hands of the corrupt. So what we need is genuine electoral reform, and genuine electoral reform is about direct accountability to constituencies. And so gone with the closed system of proportional representation, gone with a system of where we as citizens vote for parties, but we've got no say in who is representing us in the national parliament. We want to have people seated there whom we can remove when they do not fulfill our best interests and our best aspirations. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
I just wanted to say to the religious leaders, we've got Daryl on the Inclusive Society, they've got a time limitation, so all protocol reserved. If I just ask Daryl from Inclusive to address us.
Thank you very much, Michael, and my apologies, but I need to leave in a couple of minutes. I think there are two things at stake here. The first is that we need broader electoral reform. It's clear about that, and in fact we have made proposals to the Portfolio Committee and also submissions now to the NCOP on a multi-member proportional, multi-member constituency system. That's what we need. Be that it may, the specific problem we have is that the current bill before Parliament is unconstitutional. For that, we have obtained a legal opinion from the Faculty of Law at the University of Stellenbosch, which clearly spells it out, and it is based on the principle, on the constitutional principle of equality. There are four main issues that civil society have identified in the current bill as being unconstitutional. The first is the barrier to entry. Secondly is that votes are not treated equally in terms of proportionality. The third is the filling of vacancies. And the fourth is participating in the proportional or compensatory list part of the election. Now, we as the Inclusive Society Institute are concerned about two specific elements. The first element is that the barriers to entry. And what is the problem there? The problem there is that for an independent to participate in this election, they need to get something like 13 to 17,000 seconding signatories. That's a near impossible task. Whereas if you want to register as a political party, you only need 1,000. So there's the equality problem. And what we are thinking, our thinking is that even though this bill has been amended to technically allow participants, independents to participate in the election, it could very well be seen as a scheme to actually keep independents out. So that's the first part. The second thing is that whilst independents can stand in all 9 provinces, they cannot add those 9 provinces together to get the requisite number of votes for them to be part of, to be elected to Parliament. Whereas if you are a small independent, so they will only, their votes will only count in the various provinces, but they cannot be added together. On the other hand, if you are a small political party, a startup political party, your votes will be counted from across the whole country. So once again, you can see the equality problem. So that is why we as the Inclusive Society Institute are against this current bill, and we are opposing it. We've made submissions, and we have provided the various committees in Parliament with that legal opinion. So they know what the position is, and when it goes to the Constitutional Court, they must not say they did not know. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we do believe that we need broader political reform, as I said, but in these specific, not only have we pointed out to the committees where the problem lies, we've actually provided them with remedies where they can make the current law constitutional. So whereas we want broader political electoral reform, that is a process that we think we need to embark upon as a nation, also a process that I don't think should be rushed. This is a national discussion, and we need the nation to participate. This is going to affect the fundamentals of our democracy, and therefore it should not be rushed. It should be an inclusive discussion. But at the very minimum, this law before the NCOP now needs to pass constitutional muster, and it will not unless they make these changes. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. McLewy, for affording this opportunity. I'm Maulana Aftab Haidar, acting chairperson of the Western Cape Religious Leaders Forum, a multi-faith leadership speaking and acting for justice and people and peace for people and planet. On behalf of Western Cape Religious Leaders Forum, we would like to endorse this call for reform in the electoral bill, including the amendment which has been approved by Parliament, and of course it does not respond to the request or to the demands and challenges of our Constitution, Charter of Human Rights Bill, and so on. We indeed agree and endorse that this bill or this amendment of the bill should be called back and should be looked upon from different angles and aspects. However, of course, our membership have different opinions regarding different details, and we don't want to go in those details that how this must go. But at this moment, in the present form, of course, it does not offer what it's supposed to, what it demanded, for example, the basic right, the equality and representation of the people in Parliament. And of course, and indeed, our membership also brought up this point, as it was mentioned, I think, by earlier speakers, the issue of accountability, the issue of how we will take our elected members accountable for what they have been chosen and elected. This is a serious challenge, and we need to really somehow address this through this electoral system. As well as, of course, another issue which came up was that the parties itself and inside the parties, how much really democratic system works and how this list of candidates has been prepared and how much really real democratic system or values has been established. So that's another point of concern which this bill or whole electoral system need to look at it. But again, once we endorse this call and we support fully this call by the civil society to review this present existing amendment bill of electoral system. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Rian de Villiers. I am minister of one of the ministers of this congregation. And I would like to welcome you here in our building. When President Nelson Mandela stood here at this exact lectern in 1999, he said, and I quote, selfishness, corruption, a lack of a sense of community and neighborly service, these are the spiritual enemies of our efforts to build a new society where we can all live together in decency. We are therefore in need of leaders that will use their positions, their influence and their power to establish a culture and a society that is based on the principles of love, sacrifice, and neighborly and community service. I believe that what we are trying to create here in this space to bring civil society together is what we hope electoral reform will help us to achieve next door in Parliament and bring to our national and provincial legislatures, bring society together, to create a space where the voice of the people can be heard, where there can be dialogue, discernment, and a compassionate understanding of the challenges that we face as a society. It must be a place where every community and every person is represented, and where there is a will and the experience to bring about the change needed to build a new society. A place where we, as civil society, as country, are united in service to the people, and especially to the most vulnerable and marginalized in our society. We therefore need a parliament that is filled with leaders who know the communities they represent. Leaders who have a proven track record of service to their community and a clear understanding of the challenges we are facing. Leaders who can inspire us and help us to overcome the giants of inequality, injustice, poverty, unemployment, corruption, violence, and crime. These things that are destroying our efforts to build a more inclusive, equal, just, and peaceful society. A place where there is hope, opportunity, and conditions which will enable all to flourish. We need leaders that can lead us into this promised land as envisioned by the Freedom Charter and the Constitution of our country. Our current political and electoral system is not going to take us there. We want to move away from a system of political party lists, cadre deployment, internal party politics, and divisions. And we want to be able to use our vote, our one vote, to vote for leaders who will represent us and serve our communities and our country above any political party or personal interests. The current electoral amendment bill does not provide a workable solution to achieve this, and therefore does not represent the voice of the people or satisfy the aims and the objectives of the Constitution, and does not give us the necessary freedom to elect our real leaders to Parliament, and therefore we need to demand changes to it. Because we need a Parliament where the voices of the people are heard and not drowned out by the noise of political ambition and opportunism. We need a Parliament that brings us together in unity and not divides us further. We need a Parliament where accountability is at the forefront of everything that is done, and not where accountability is only an afterthought that takes years to be investigated by commissions of inquiry. We need a Parliament built on openness, on honesty, trust, and the social contract for change, not one that is devoid of credibility and in which we have no confidence. We need a Parliament that will make sure our children are sleeping safe at night, and not a Parliament where members are asleep on the benches. As we are busy rebuilding the National Assembly next door after the fire that destroyed it at the beginning of this year, let us also continue to rebuild the system of electoral and accountability. Let us rebuild the system in which we elect the leaders that will represent us in Parliament. We therefore call on the National Council of Provinces to send this bill back to National Assembly. And we call on President Ramaphosa to not sign this bill in its current form into law, but to take up his mantle of leadership and effect the processes to make the required changes to the bill, to bring it in line with the objectives of the Constitution and the will of the people. Amandla Gawetu.
Good afternoon. My name is Llewellyn McMaster. I am the moderator of the Cape Regional Synod of Uniting Reformed Church. I'm not going to repeat some of the stuff, but just to say that, yes, it's 28 years of democracy. But I think today we have enough evidence to conclude that we are not where we thought we'd be or where we should be as a nation. Faith communities and their leaders cannot afford to be silent while this process is running right now. My own faith tradition compels me to raise my prophetic voice against injustice in any form, including systemic structural manifestations thereof, to oppose the oppressor, the powerful and the rich, who disregard the well-being of the poor and vulnerable. Our own Confession of Belhar clearly advocates for justice and envisions a society where people will experience dignity and fullness of life. Our pastoral obligation is to ask the critical question: whose interests are being served by the current electoral system and the proposed changes? Clearly, those currently in power are not putting the people or the electorate's interests first. So we say, and we add our voice today to those who reject this bill and the amendments. We say our people's interests should be prioritized over party political interests. We say political accountability has been sacrificed for the sake of privilege and positions, and this has to change. We cannot continue to be spectators while witnessing layers and layers of historical and intergenerational trauma in our communities and the lives of our people. While politicians are continuing to serve their own interests. And on the other end, while our people struggle to survive, being stripped of their human dignity under the most hopeless and inhumane circumstances. Today, we add our voice and say, give the power back to the people so that they can demand accountability from those they voted in. Our people deserve a better life, not just as a political slogan, but as a lived reality. I thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Stewart of the FW de Klerk Foundation. All protocol observed. Our foundation wishes to record its opposition to and its deep disappointment with the current electoral bill. The bill had its origins in an order to Parliament from the Constitutional Court to amend the Electoral Act to bring it into line with the constitutional requirement that independent candidates should be able to stand in national and provincial elections. The Foundation viewed this as a golden opportunity to rectify other defects in the electoral process. Firstly, to ensure that members of Parliament are accountable to voters, not to political bosses. And secondly, to establish a clearer separation between the executive and legislature powers. As both the Constitutional Court and the Zondo Commission have pointed out, one of the great failings of our young democracy has been the inability of Parliament to carry out its core oversight duty, to scrutinize the activities of the government, to ensure that it complies with both the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. However, because MPs are de facto accountable to the executive, to their political bosses, and not to the voters, Parliament has not carried out this function with disastrous consequences, which we've seen. This was one of the main reasons that we had state capture. It was because Parliament was not carrying out its duty to scrutinize government. All this could have been prevented had the government adopted the very sensible electoral reforms proposed by the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission, which would have established a system in which 300 members of Parliament would be elected on a constituency base in multi-member constituencies, while the remaining 100 would be elected on party lists. The present electoral bill fails entirely to carry out both the spirit and the letter of the Constitutional Court's order. It creates a system in which votes cast for independent candidates would not have the same value as votes cast for parties. This is fundamentally unacceptable. The idea that they should stand for election in constituencies comprising entire provinces is both unworkable and unfair to independents, whose support bases usually lie in specific communities in which they reside. We call on the government to withdraw this bill and to draft legislation that will make it possible for independent candidates to stand for elections on an equitable basis, that will enhance our democracy by making members of parliament accountable to the people who elect them, and that will help to establish a clearer separation of powers between the legislature and the executive. Thank you.
Goeiemiddag, good afternoon, wassalamu alaikum, and shalom. My name is Neil de Beer. Normally when I do a public speech, there's a disclaimer, and Michael always asks me to do that disclaimer. Not everything I say in public, these people will agree with. I said that today I will leave emotion, passion and direct speaking like I normally do for a bit. But you must forgive me, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, as ek nou reguit gaan praat met julle, soos ek altyd doen. Hoe teta, hoe ngamom slaan jy? I am the president of the UIM. The media describes me as an ex-ANC intelligence spy officer, commander of forces and ex-security officer, serving in the Mandela era as an MK commander. I come from war. I come from peace. And I'd like to read you, because I'm a bit dyslexic, I can read numbers, words I falter. But the last piece of a poem I'd like to read, saying, it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. This is Nelson Rolihlahla Madiba Mandela's favorite poem called Invictus. It was scribed in his cell. And today, unbeknownst to you, Michael, I was 5 years old when I entered this church. And old Prime Minister B.J. Foster, his brother Johan Foster, was die dominee here. I sat right there where that gentleman sits at 5 with my grandmother. What a great day. What an auspicious occasion. And here are my words, and hear them well, media. Hear them very well. You have an obligation as the voice of the truth, if you can remember. But to speak the truth, you must have no fear. Leadership must have backbone. We have none. To lead this country into peace, we need a leadership that cares, that remembers Ubuntu, umasakane. And when I speak these days, and Michael has to unfortunately listen, I speak of a domestic warfare happening to our people. Today in Mitchell's Plain, another died. 4 police officers this week. I said to Michael one day, who has lead with his followers, and I said to His Royal Highness the Prince, you don't have to fight about land, you have land. And here's the truth. Al Gore said one day, as Vice President of the United States, he said, you will never make a man understand a certain point of view if he's paid not to. They know they're wrong. This bill is a lie in their eye. So you've given us a Toyota Corolla, and you didn't give me a steering wheel. That's how the ANC government has treated this bill. I know it because I support it, Michael. So what they've done, no lie, is they have just ensured that they comply with certain issues as given by the apex court of this country. Just to get through. And here's my closing statement. I said to Michael, why do you do this? Why does OSA, why do you guys continue fighting for this electoral amendment bill? And Michael told me one day, he said, it is not just about the bill. It is about justice. If it is against the law, if it is unconstitutional, then we must fight. When you are a member of parliament, you take an oath, and one of that is to defend, protect, and uphold the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa undisputedly. We now have a major part of parliament who will go ahead and, in my opinion, breach their oath of office. And if it starts with the electoral bill, what other laws, what other judgments will be disregarded in the future? For Margaret Thatcher said one day, Madam Speaker, the theft of a pen remains theft. So I, as the UIM, and as current, not future leader in politics, say the following: we are totally in agreement in the dispute of the legality of this bill. 5 months ago, as Michael knows, I was diagnosed now with terminal cancer. 2024 to me is but a dream. I might not see it. But once you now know how potentially important every minute is of life, do you decide to fight every second to give life? In '94, we fought for a country to be free. In 2024, we will fight for a country to be saved. That's why we are here, inshallah. I leave you with that message. Do not, as the media and the public, let our freedom be watered away because of greed, corruption, and power. God guides us. And Michael always says every day, there's light, Michael. To you who have stood the fight, continue. Aluta, continua. We have a great country. We have a great people. We just have a current bad government. And the power lies with you to change it and to put individuals in parliament that we can hire and fire. if they don't speak on our behalf. Continue, don't give up, Michael. As long as I am alive, I am behind you. And Warren, it is good to see you. You also keep on the fight with him. He's the magic man for publicity. I've worked long with him, so dis goed om julle weer te sien. God bless you and move forward in this fight. Shukran and thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and to my leaders behind me. My name is Songezo Zibi. I'm from the Rivonia Circle, and we reject this bill in the current form. This is why. Democracy is a system of self-government. The principle of one person, one vote matters, because that means whoever you are, wherever you may be, whichever organization you may or may not belong to, your vote counts the same as that of another citizen. This bill interferes and attempts to destroy that principle, and we must not allow it to happen. This is now a deeper issue than whether independent candidates may contest. Because if this bill was done in good faith, even in the context of political parties, South Africans would get an opportunity to make informed political, ethical, and moral assessments of those who wish to represent them in Parliament and the legislature. Because democracy is about values. It is about ethics. It is about compassion. It is also about another fundamental principle, which is that those we elect are servants, not leaders who can make unilateral decisions to take some of our freedoms as they wish because they want to protect their positions in power. The power belongs to the South African people. An election is an instrument through which we decide to entrust for a temporary defined period with that power in trust. Otherwise, it belongs to the South African people, always. Moral choices don't matter under the system we have. Moral and ethical choices will matter even less under what is proposed. This is a moment as important as 1994 was, as it represents gatekeeping and an attempt to take backwards our democratic gains that we have had. We must, failing any other remedy, ensure that the South African people remember in 2024 which parties and so-called leaders wanted to keep power to themselves and who stood up for more power to the people as it should be in a democracy. I don't expect this to be an easy fight. I do not expect this to be a short one either. But we must stand up, we must fight, we must not give up, because this is about the future of our country and the future of our democracy and the kind of society we choose to have. I want to thank all the leaders assembled here, because we get an opportunity to see who is interested in power and who is interested in the kind of society we should have. Thank you.
So, colleagues, we're just going to have our last speaker, and it's actually an interesting speaker because a couple of years ago I thought we need to have proof of concept of having a well-trained, equipped, skilled person to stand in government and to show can he make a difference or not. And a man by the name of Ken Klerk that employs thousands of people decided to put his hand up. Jy lyk 'n bietjie gryser vir my, but in any case he does look more grey than before. But he became a councillor in the Enoch Makajima municipality in Queenstown, and I thought he can just give you his personal experience of being one man in a municipality and what that power can do when you give power to the people. I welcome you, Ken Klerk.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, you've caught me off guard a little bit, but I have first-hand experience of the brazenness that political people will go to achieve their own ends, where corruption is now a way of life, and the people that are in the municipality actually mean nothing. We have no services, but we pay 350 million rand a year to people who do no work. Such atrocities cannot be ignored any longer. We are fighting today for the survival of democracy in this country, whether we like it or not. We cannot allow a situation where 5,000 people who gather somewhere in a different place every year decides who will represent the citizens of this country in Parliament. We need to give that power back to the people. The people must decide who are good enough to lead them and who they want in power. We can no longer have the situation where somebody else decides for us. We are good enough to make up our own mind. So I, Michael, support you and your organization and all you have done to fight this fight. It is admirable and a worthy cause, and I support you 100%. And I think that 98% of the people in this country do the same. Good luck, and let's make it happen. The power is in our hands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much. I think that closes our session. And the fight's not finished. We're going to put everything behind. And once again, as closing, just remember, it's not one or two people. It's a collaborative of all of us standing together to fight the good fight. So God bless you all. And may I just say thank you to Rian for hosting us in this beautiful venue, and to think that there's live stream over here and how good it is that we can communicate with live stream to so many people. So God bless and thank you very much.